Good morning or good afternoon to all those of you joining us today for the Bright Start Tennessee Lunch and Learn. This is our September version. We're hosting a virtual webinar to kind of walk through and understand a little bit more about solutions to issues and problems across the state of Tennessee in the birth through age 8 space. Today we've got an exciting panel in front of us. We're going to talk about Knoxville and Knox County and the work that they're doing with community schools. For those of you that may be new to this area and this space, welcome. My name is Jonathan Schoonover. I serve as the Senior Vice President of Strategic Practice, also serve as the Director for the Bright Start Tennessee Network. We are, as Tennesseans for Quality Early Education, a nonpartisan coalition of advocates for Tennessee's youngest learners, and we are trying to advance the state policies and practices that ensure Tennessee children from birth through age 8 or birth through 3rd grade get the high quality care and education that they need to power our state's future. We have started Bright Start Tennessee Network to be this statewide network of community partnerships that really is focused on closing achievement and opportunity gaps for children birth through age 8. This is a new slide, exciting for me. There are 2 new stars on there. For those of you that may have been used to seeing this, we are now up to covering 60% of Tennessee's population. We've added 2 new communities to the family. So South Central Tennessee and Upper Cumberland. The United Way of Rutherford and Canyon counties covers 4 counties in South Central, and then the Upper Cumberland Development District covers 14 counties in Upper Cumberland. We did an orientation with them earlier this week and hopefully have some of you from that on the call today. So excited to welcome you officially to the family. While we're getting started here and before we jump into our speakers, let me ask you and invite you to put your name, your organization, and your region in the chat. Just that way it'll help us to kind of capture who actually shows up. But yeah, name, organization, and region in the chat. That would be fantastic. And while we do, you guys have seen this before, but for some of the new communities, we know that to get to 3rd grade reading and math proficiency, kind of as our high benchmark of what we're trying to achieve, that it takes success in these 3 domains: high quality birth through age 8 learning environments, physical health, mental health, and development being on track beginning at birth, and then supported and supportive communities, families and communities. And to do that, we've really broken this down a little bit further into these 15 measures of success. So 5 measures of success for each of these domains. I won't read through all of those right now, but the cool thing I'll show you on this next slide is that community school strategy actually is the one that actually covers the most number of our 15 measures of success. So when you do the crosswalk of the evidence basis for what those strategies impact, we see right here, you can see the community schools as a whole. There's only 3 that it doesn't really touch. The healthy birth weights, the early intervention, and the high quality care and education piece. But all the rest of these 12 are impacted by a community school strategy that's functioning at its full capacity. So very excited to kind of talk about that today. I've also got a little bit of a personal connection with this, working at Great Schools Partnership back in the day with Knox Ed now, and then now it's at United Way. Have known Adam for a long time. I've been excited to kind of do this, but we've got 2 great speakers today, Ellie Kittrell and Adam Fritz. I'm going to put them on spotlight so that you guys can see them, and then I'm going to stop showing my video. Let me add a spotlight here. Add a spotlight, stop sharing. So just so that you guys know, there is a little bit of hometown favoritism here. Born and raised in Knox County, and love the work that the community schools folks are doing, and just excited to turn it over. Let me turn it over to Ellie Kittrell, who's our fellow and kind of representation of the backbone organization for the Bright Steps plan that has been launched out of the United Way of Greater Knoxville. She's the Director of Education Systems, and excited to turn it over to you, Ellie.
Thank you, and I'm officially not on mute, so it's a good step. Welcome everybody. I'm so excited for you to hear from Adam Fritz, our Director of Community Schools, and we just can't speak highly enough of this strategy and the impact that it has in Knox County for over 5,000 students and the adults that care for them and support them. So just a little bit of background: community schools has been in Knox County for well over a decade, and up until recently was part of another organization. United Way of Greater Knoxville has just taken over administration of the community school strategy here at 15 local schools, 13 elementary schools and 2 middle schools. The community schools and expansion and expanded support of community schools was identified as a key strategy in our Bright Steps action plan. So again, we're just thrilled to be able to take on administration of the strategy, bring additional supports and resources to it, add a spotlight to it, and also to add an early childhood emphasis into its impact in Knox County School District. And we'll hopefully be able to share a little bit more about that broader impact sometime in this next year. But that's enough from me. I want to hand it over to Adam Fritz, again, our Director of Community Schools. He's been working with community schools for 11 years, I think is the calculation, and has served as a coordinator, supervisor, and now director, and is just an incredible servant leader. So we're excited to hear from him today.
Thanks, Ellie. Thank you, Jonathan. It's really good to be in front of you all today. I'm excited for the opportunity to share about community schools and to talk a little bit about what I hope is can sort of spark some ideas on how this strategy is really a strategy for all. I mean, I know I'm speaking obviously to a group of folks who are really focused on the early education piece, but I think the beautiful thing about this strategy, and we'll get into more details as we go, and the reason that I'm so passionate about it is because of it is an inclusive strategy that is designed to involve everyone and to be able to impact everyone. So, like I say, I'm really excited to be in front of you today, and I'm looking forward to this opportunity. Let me share my screen as we get started. So, again, my name is Adam Fritz, Director of Community Schools. I have been with the Community Schools strategy since 2012. I started as a site coordinator in one of the 3 pilots that took place in Knoxville. The Community School strategy started in Knoxville in 2010 through a university-assisted model, and that model was instituted by the University of Tennessee, with Dr. Bob Cronick being the lead on that. The model that we have been doing since 2012 is slightly different than their model, and I can get into the details if someone is very interested offline. But I think the biggest piece that I would say about the model that you're going to hear about today is probably a little more on our emphasis across the entire group of stakeholders that could be impacted by a school community, and also the services that are how they are open for all. So I think just one of the things I like to do when giving this presentation is sort of start as a baseline of like making sure everybody understands what community schools is, and then we can talk about what community schools are, and that is an important distinction. And then we'll talk about what community schools, what they look like in Knoxville and what they've looked like for us. As I mentioned previously, there's an important distinction to be made between what community schools is and then what community schools are. So what is community schools? Community schools is a local engagement strategy that creates and coordinates opportunities with its public schools to accelerate student success. It serves as a vehicle for hyperlocal decision-making that responds to the unique needs of each community by bringing together the relationships and assets of a neighborhood. And community schools can efficiently and effectively utilize resources to advance the well-being of children and their families now and for future generations. This is a definition that is given by the Institute of Educational Leadership for Community Schools, which is the entity that we operate community schools under. It is a national model that we follow. There are other models of community schools that are out there that have different focuses in different areas of that they sort of focus in, but ours comes from that larger entity. One when we talk about community schools, what we're really talking about, it's really specific and really important to note that we are a strategy and not a program. Why that distinction is really important is because the things that we do through community schools are based as much on process as they are results. We could get into conversations about the effects of community schools, and we will definitely do that later on. But I think the really thing that separates why we call this a strategy is the importance of the method by which we work through solving the problems for our communities, which really speaks to this idea that it's not really about us trying to solve problems for the communities, but it's about us working with the communities and empowering them to rise and meet their own challenges. We also, when we talk about community schools as not a program, want to make sure that we're emphasizing that because the strategy is what is the unique piece, the way that it is implemented across different sites will be varied based on what the local needs of that community are. You could go to one community school and see an emphasis on something and walk into another community school and see an emphasis on something completely different. And if you don't understand the fact that community schools is a strategy and not a program, you could go, well, wait a second, is this a community school? But because our strategy is what is consistent, that can tend to be sometimes not seen as consistent across the board. When what we're really highlighting is the strategy and that consistency there. So when we talk about that, we're talking about it as a strategy of how and not what. And as I mentioned before, we emphasize the process and the results. The process is just as important. The next piece about this is the fact that this is a hyper-local strategy, as it was mentioned in the definition. And as I mentioned, the things that happen are going to be based very much on the community that the school is sitting in. That results in a strategy that is led from the bottom up instead of top down. Many times what we see in our communities is people coming up with ideas and they decide they're going to go into the community and they're going to implement the idea without ever having been asked to be there. And oftentimes that causes more harm than was intended, simply because we wind up giving people something that they don't need or didn't ask for, and then they have to maintain for in the future when they didn't ask to be involved in that either. So it's really important when you're trying to build capacity in a community and the community speaks up and is dealing with their own challenges, that they are the ones speaking into the process and speaking into the things that you're actually going to try to do. And then finally, because it is local and because it's bottom up versus top down, this is a strategy that travels well. You can implement community schools in a rural setting, you can implement it in an urban setting, and you can implement it in a suburban setting. And it really doesn't matter what type of school you're in, what community you're in. It works because it is led by the people that live there. So when we talk about community schools, what it really is it's a collaborative change process. It is schools, it is government, it's neighborhoods, it's businesses, it's nonprofits, it's higher education. It's all the folks that can be considered as a stakeholder playing a role in figuring out how to address the challenges that our communities are facing. It's also a place. One of the things about community schools that we try to emphasize is the fact that community schools is a place that all are welcome. We are housed in public schools intentionally. It is the public schools are the one place that, unless a decision has been made about homeschool or whatever the case may be, or private schooling, like everyone has to go there. It is required by law when you turn 5 that kids have to go to school. And so because of that, we have access to all of the people who could be engaged there for that reason. So when we talk about what are community schools, our community schools have some things that are pretty specific about them. And we know that these things need to be in place for us to say that community schools are in existence for us. So the first one of those things is having a site coordinator. Every one of our community schools has a full-time site coordinator that is on site working with the staff, working with the neighborhood, working with the students, working with the parents, really taking a taking a role in that community as a advocate for all of those folks and as a partner with all of those folks. The second thing that takes place after we put a site coordinator in there is that we have a site-specific needs and asset assessment that takes place. This is really important because we can't know what to do. We can't know what to talk about. We can't know what questions to ask until we ask the main questions of what are the things that this school needs, but also, which is, I believe this is almost more important, what are the things that this school and community already has? Oftentimes we make assumptions that our communities are lacking without making the same assumption that they have great strengths, and they do have great strengths, and we need to know what those are so that we're not duplicating and replicating resources, but also meeting people their need where they're at. And then finally, once we have that information, we use a site-based steering committee made up of those stakeholders I mentioned before, the parents, the school staff, and the community members. And those folks are the people that make decisions about what the needs and asset assessment is telling them. They're the ones that decide what the needs are, what the assets are, and how they decide to move forward. Once they decide to move forward, we really operate in four main pillars. Those pillars are shared collaborative leadership and practice, expanded enrichment opportunities, active family and community engagement, and integrated student supports. And we'll talk a little bit more as we go about what those actually look like here in Knoxville for us. But those are the four pillars that we operate under, and everything we do really falls in line with those four areas. So in Knox County right now, there are 14 elementary schools that are community schools. As I mentioned, there is the one that is run by the University of Tennessee, and right now there are 13 that are supported by the United Way of Greater Knoxville. And then this year we are also in 2 middle schools as well, and both of those are supported by the United Way. As I mentioned previously, the community school strategy has been around since 2012, and every school that we have has been a community school since 2018 at the latest. So for United Way and the community schools goals, and you can see them as they're popping up on the screen, we're really wanting to make sure that we're ensuring whole child development from early childhood to career. We're wanting to build strong and productive partnerships with families, and we're also wanting to create a positive and collaborative culture in our schools and neighborhoods. And that's really where we're trying to spend a lot of our time, making sure that we are keeping those goals at top of mind. So going back and talking about the strategy a little bit, I want to talk about like how we do an asset assessment and sort of the cycle that we go through before we tackle anything. The first step, as I mentioned before, is assessment of the needs and assessment of the strengths. Once those conversations have happened, and once we have had those, we have done that bit of assessment, and that assessment happens through asset mapping. It happens through not just parents, but stakeholder surveys. It happens through focus groups. It happens through a lot of different mechanisms where we're asking people to provide feedback, both about the good and the stuff they wish was a little bit better that is happening in their community. Once that happens, we then go to the stage of prioritization. So we're going to hear a lot of feedback in those spaces. We're going to hear some people that say that the greatest thing since sliced bread is this, and you could have another group of people who are talking about that same thing and go, man, it's not that great. And we have to sort of weed through that. And the way we do that is with our site steering committees. We do not make those distinctions ourselves because we are not most of the time not people who live in those communities, although we do have folks that live in these areas, but we really want our stakeholders making those decisions. So as those needs are prioritized and decisions are made about which things we want to tackle first, that is the moment that our site coordinators begin convening our partner agencies to help support these initiatives. The reason it's really important about this partners aspect, and the reason that we lean so much on it is because utilizing partners, whether those partners are nonprofits or local churches and local neighborhood organizations or parents or whoever the case may be, really ensures sustainability for the priorities being seen all the way through and then continuing on. As we prioritize, one of the things we want to make sure we do is we want to make sure we know what it looks like when we've accomplished what it is we've set out to do. And so part of that is making sure that there is a sustainable system in place so that when implementation occurs, after the convening does, that this implementation can carry on in perpetuity, or for as long as that need is still needing to be addressed. And then finally, after the implementation takes place, we evaluate. We ask, how is it going? Did it go well? Are there things about it that could be better? And what that evaluation really feeds into that assessment, and we start the cycle all over again so that we can decide the next year if the priorities that we've tried to address have actually been met, or if they need to continue to be on the radar as something that that our steering committees are asking our coordinators and our partner coalitions to focus on. So the characteristics of our community schools, as I mentioned, we do have a site coordinator in every school. They are full-time. They serve as in the following capacities. They serve as an advocate, they serve as a convener, and they serve as a facilitator. The work of that coordinator is really to make sure that those pieces that are coming to the table, those partners who are coming to the table to support, the stakeholders who are coming to the table to make decisions, are in communication with one another and are working together in a way where everyone's needs are being communicated. They're also responsible for bringing those folks to the table on a regular basis. And then finally, the other piece is making sure that those pieces are working together as a well-oiled machine. And sometimes those roles sort of blend all together. The site steering committees, as I mentioned before, are made up of a third parents and caregivers, a third school staff, but we do not include administrators in that. And then a third community members, and those community members can be everybody from neighbors to local partners to local business owners, members of the church. It just sort of depends on what is where they are and what those communities look like. So when we think about shared collaborative leadership and practice, I want to talk a little bit about what our pillars look like here in Knoxville. Really, that shared collaborative leadership and practice piece is really making sure all voices at the table are represented, and also the decisions that are made in those spaces are communicated effectively to all those who are impacted by those decisions. So we talk about that as our steering committee, to our decision makers, our partner coalitions, who are really our hands and feet when it comes to these things. And then the other groups that we know are in existence across these communities are whole child teams at the school level, our PTOs, our neighborhood organizations, our business associations. All of these groups have stakes in these communities. And so we ask our coordinators to be present in those spaces to help advocate for people who are not in those spaces, and also communicate decisions that are made across those different spectrums of stakeholders, so that people can really know that these things that they're doing are not happening in a silo or a vacuum. We also want to make sure that our focus is on communication accountability, to make sure that when we're talking about communicating these things out, we are communicating them in a way that everyone can understand. So we know that there are different literacy levels, there are different language levels, there are all kinds of different variables that can contribute to how someone receives information. And so we want to make sure when our schools are communicating, when our partners are communicating, when our community members are communicating, whatever that communication is that it is going to be put out in ways that people are going to be able to understand, hear, receive, and utilize. So that's why that communication accountability piece is really important for us. When we think about active family and community engagement, our focus is really in three areas. There is family empowerment, which is beyond just engagement. It's beyond just people showing up, but parents knowing how they can speak on behalf of their student and on their own behalf to advocate for themselves. It's about partnering community engagement. So making sure that those folks who are around the school are involved with what's happening at the school level. And then that shared school and community investment piece is this idea. Many times we ask our community to come in and do stuff for the school, but the school doesn't look at itself and say, what can we do for the community in addition to just to the, I say just, not as if it's insignificant, but in addition to the education of children, like what can we offer? These public buildings that our schools are in are buildings that are paid for by taxpayers, whether their kids go to school there or not. So, this can include things as providing schools as meeting spaces, as it can include utilization of playground spaces for the community. And it's really just about making sure that both of those groups of people are as invested in each other as they can be. When we think about our expanded enrichment opportunities, we really break those down into two separate categories. The first category is health and well-being programs. These are designed to be preventative to make sure that kids are healthy and well so that they can be in the school building and be ready to learn, really being proactive in that. So those programmings include everything from fitness and nutrition to healthy lifestyle and social and emotional learning. And then the other piece that we do is college and vocational exposure. And we really think about that, particularly at the elementary school level, as a space where kids can be exposed to the things that they are going to like and not like. We put our arts and culture in that category. We put our STEM programming in that category, in addition to things that are really more targeted around college awareness and maybe vocational awareness. We really think it's important that our kids have experiences so that they, when they get to, particularly in our, as Knox County has rolled out an 865 Academy, which is really asking kids to be making decisions about what they want to be when they grow up, maybe earlier than they would have normally. We really want to make sure that our kids have a basis for how they make those decisions and to know the kinds of things that they could be involved in. And then finally, our integrated student supports, those we have broken those down into three categories. The first category is school readiness assistance. And the idea behind this is we want to make sure that a child is ready to be in their seat when they walk into the school building. So it's everything from making sure that they're there on time, making sure that they have the supplies that they need, making sure that they have to leave class, that they are able to get back to class very quickly. And also where we talk about our health services and making sure that kids, if there is a medical need, that we're addressing that. The second piece of this is family stability assistance. This is really about making sure that families can be in their homes. We know that it's really important for kids to start the school year and end the school year in the same situation with the same teacher and the same expectations. And the more we move kids around, the less likely they are to be able to succeed in the classroom. So we really want to make sure that in that space, we're making it and supporting our parents as much as they can to make sure that they are in a space that they can stay in throughout the whole year with regards to housing, with regards to food, with regards to clothing, or any other basic needs support. And then finally, our final bucket, as we would call it in integrated student supports, is positive behavior promotion. So in addition to making sure that a child can stay in their home and making sure that a child can stay in their seat, it's also about making a child can stay in their classroom. So we partner with aftercare agencies and mentoring agencies in Knoxville to just make sure that kids have extra adults that are going to be checking in on them and caring about them and really encouraging them to be successful. So when we think about the effects of community schools, some of the things that we have seen are classroom and grade level adoption programs. These are programs where we partner up community partners with grade levels or classrooms to make sure that those folks have the things that they need. It has resulted in outdoor and garden coalitions. It's resulted in community-led weekend food programs where the communities are the ones that are delivering the food and packing the food and then distributing the food to the students. It's manifested itself in staff wellness committees, which have led to improvements in teacher spaces and just supportive teachers, especially now in this time where we're having such a huge issue with turnover. From a regional level, we have seen collaboration across schools to ensure that holiday assistance is distributed equitably, but also in making sure that everyone is involved and we don't have situations where we're just trying to match kids with programs without being really thoughtful in how that is done. And then initiative-wide, a couple examples, we have a Thanksgiving basket distribution program where we work with a local church to supply 500 baskets to our community schools. And those baskets can be added to baskets that are collected within the neighborhoods themselves. And then we also have a dental coalition that we have supported, pulling together to ensure that there are dental services being offered to all of our community schools, elementary school students. And last year, we even had a situation where through this program, there was we actually had student where cancer was caught early, and we were able to make sure that that got treated. So that's a screening process that's trying to be preventative. But in that case, it caught something early. So, but that also, in addition to that, provides dental care for our elementary school sites. And then, so when we think about the results of community schools, what we have seen is 225 potential community leaders serving on our site steering committees for this upcoming year. We had 910 families participate in our 2022 parent access survey and our parent assessment, which really guided how we did our work last year. We have had over 36 campus and neighborhood improvement projects that have taken place since 2012. And those things have included teacher lounges and play areas, an outdoor classroom, and calming corners. And last year, over 4,500 students received either an integrated student support, an enrichment opportunity, or participated in a family and community engagement event. And the reason that we've been able to do that is because of the net that we cast being so wide. We are incorporating as many partners, utilizing their expertise as we can. We are asking and inviting partners who have expertise in particular areas to serve in the enrichment space. We're connecting kids with aftercare, connecting kids with mentoring opportunities, and then our family and community engagement events that are being put on are really everything from parent empowerment to just sometimes community fun and making sure people have maybe a safe place to be on Halloween, for example. So I think as we think about what community schools can do, I think it's really important. The thing that I would like to highlight is that, and sort of end on, is that community schools is as effective and as wide ranging as the stakeholder group that we try to empower. The reason that we can have community members impacted is because community members are participating on the front end. The reason that we can have parents impacted and parents participating in parent surveys is because we are asking them on the front end and they have seen the results of that request. The reason that we are seeing some of these campus improvement projects happening is because we are listening to all of the stakeholders and asking them about spaces that they need in their schools. So the more that we can incorporate people on the front end and ask them what it is that they want, the results that we see reflect the stakeholders that are participating. And so when we think about early childhood and we think about how community schools can impact that space, it's really going to be down to how we include and incorporate people who are concerned in that space and making sure that we're listening to them. And if we do, and we follow through on that as we continue to move forward, I think one of the things that community schools can bring to Knoxville that has not been there currently is more directed programming and strategy and conversations around how to impact early childhood, specifically because of the people who will be speaking into that space.
It's fantastic. I appreciate it. Really excited to kind of show this. There's a video on that. We skipped over a slide. There's a video on that. I dropped that link to that in the chat as well. What I would love to invite you to do now, we've got about 5 more minutes here. Would love to invite you to come off of mute. If you're brave enough to come on video as well, would love to see. I'm going to stop sharing the screen here and would love to have you guys ask any questions about this model, about community schools, about what this looks like. So with that said, come on off mute and you can raise your hand if you want to, or just come on off and talk. All right. Any questions at all? I asked this for myself. Usually for the guests, I don't do this, but for Adam, I'll say questions, comments, or snide remarks. He takes those as well. So.
Hey, Jonathan, Beth Lackey. This makes me happy. You know that. And I'm a former principal at 3 community schools. So there you go. It's one of the most important, vital, and valuable things that we do for our kiddos. And so I'm just super excited that we're expanding this into the preschool space because it supports family engagement, healthy attendance, ability for parents to work. So go Adam, go Ellie, and I'm so excited for us to see what the positive impacts this is going to make.
So true. And yes, Beth does have that firsthand experience there. What other comments or questions do you have for Adam? It's a good chance to ask him.
I'll go, Jonathan, and ask a
Yeah.
question. So I at some point put my info in the chat, but I'm with United Way of Rutherford and Cannon County. So we, as Jonathan was saying, recently came on board with Bright Start, but we also applied for the first time for the community schools grant with the Department of Education this summer, and that was super fun. And we'll see what happens in December. We'll either immediately start implementing or we'll immediately start working on an application for next year. And so I was just kind of curious, thinking from like a starting point, what are some maybe 2 or 3 things that would be critical to kind of prioritize on the very front end of starting an initiative locally?
A great question.
So I think the answer to that is true for and what we have done here, like, as we have gone to the United Way, just this past July was when we started officially. We have asked all of our groups all of our coordinators to do an asset map and really determine what are the things in these communities that are in existence that can be beneficial to them. One of the things that we have found out when doing that is sometimes, we have made assumptions about what communities need, and what we really should have made the assumption about is how well the communication to those communities has been. There have been things that have been in existence and that can meet some needs that people just didn't know about because of a language barrier, because the flyer didn't go home in the backpack, or because the signage was poor, because there's all kinds of reasons for that. So I really think the asset mapping piece is really, really important. And when we think about asset mapping, not just about the resources that are available, but also the people who care. There are more people than we give credit for that care about the communities that we're talking about serving, and all they've been waiting for is someone to ask. Just ask their opinion. Ask if they want to help, ask if they just ask. The capacity that these folks that our neighborhoods have and our community has is underestimated. And so if we go into these spaces thinking about the assets first, the assets as resources, the assets as people, then the needs will come up because the relationships will be there and you'll know those things, but we'll be able to address them in a way that is going to be respectful and giving those communities the credit that they really deserve. And I think if you start out with that space, you start out in that mindset, you start out with that heart, then the communities that we go into are willing to participate and willing to listen when we have suggestions, and just it be a more collaborative effort, because we're starting with the assets in mind and not starting.
Well, Adam, I just want to add on briefly to what you just said. And, all of this is really about building out those trusted relationships and, creating solutions that are going to really serve the neighborhood hubs and these communities. They have to come from the neighborhood and the communities, and that the only way we can dig into that is by building trusted relationships. The community school model effectively is a hyper-local collective impact process. All of the elements are there. And one other, I think, major opportunity that exists with the community school strategy is building up that skill set of the site steering committee members as facilitators and action partners, and giving them the tools to take the lead of these conversations within their communities, and building up those sustainable infrastructures, whether that community school coordinator is there 10 years from now or not, but building up those long-term sustainable structures to let people gather, convene, and empower the communities that they live in and care about.
That's spot on. I think that's great. We're unfortunately at time. I'm going to turn this over and let you guys go. Before you leave, 2 things to do. Click on the 2 links that are in the chat. One's the survey. Give us some feedback. How can we make this better? How can we make this more useful? Give us some new topics, things like that. The second is really looking at the registration. I want to draw your attention. We've done this, I think, on the 3rd or 4th Friday of every month. Next 3 months in a row, it's actually bumping up a little bit sooner. We're getting ready to run into holiday season. And so I wanted you to see that next month in October, we've got West Tennessee that's going to host us. We've got a really good kind of discussion that we're going to have. A representative from Pathways, West Tennessee Healthcare, will share about how they are finding innovative ways to address early childhood needs, including postpartum mental health care, attachment therapy, parent-child psychotherapy, rural mobile health services, and many, many more things. So would love to have you sign up and register for that one as well, and fill out that survey for us as well. Want to give a big thanks to Adam Fritz and to Ellie for coming on and speaking and talking to us a little bit about community schools. We will make the slides available. We will make a recording of the video available, and are so thankful for all that you are doing in your communities to make this really a successful endeavor across the state with Bright Start Tennessee Network. And with that said, I'm going to dismiss you. Have a great and wonderful day.